Thanks for coming. If you've just arrived, go ahead and have a seat. My name is Jonathan Sage-Martinson. I'm the Director of Planning and Economic Development for the City of St. Paul, and I'm just going to briefly kick us off here tonight. Tonight we're going to have a chance to hear a little bit about the work that Ford and the MPCA has been doing around testing on the site and the condition of the site when they're done doing their remediation. We're going to hear a little bit about the energy study and the transportation study that's been ongoing, or that's been ongoing over the last couple of months. This is a series of meetings, as you probably know, on a number of topics. We've had, over the last year and a half or so, a number of topics on the redevelopment of the Ford site, from the initial energy study that was done, to parks, to open space, to roads, to housing, et cetera. So this is another meeting in that series as we learn more about the vision for the site and the condition at which Ford will and when they'll sell it, so how we can think about how the zoning and the public realm will be designed for the future of the site and this community. So this is another meeting in the series of meetings around the future of Ford. We apologize for some folks. This is relatively quick notice. We were working to make sure we got the project leads from the various pieces we wanted to hear about tonight, schedules aligned, and so we had a choice of either doing it tonight or to wait a couple of months in terms of getting everyone here. We wanted to do it as soon as possible. So glad you can make it. If folks wanted to come but weren't able to come tonight, the City of St. Paul is videotaping here, and we'll have it available on our website. So if folks want to see it afterwards, they can sure do that. So without further ado, I'm going to step aside, and our council member, Chris Tolbert for Ward 3 here, is going to kick off the official part of the meeting. Thanks so much for coming and being part of the discussion.
I want to thank everybody for being here today. I also want to specifically thank Ford, the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency, for coming before us and giving us this informational meeting. I also know our state representative, who's been very helpful at the state capitol, despite not much else going on up there, is here. Dave Pinto. I did see him walk in. Dave, if you want to stand up. He must have gone to the restroom. So, but I know he's here. I saw him here. But he's been fantastic for us up at the Capitol. This is going to be a quick informational meeting, and I think that's a good thing. One, because we'll get the information out there, but also two, I would encourage everybody. And part of the reason we wanted to make this quick is it's a big jazz fest down in Highland Village right after this. So I encourage everybody to, after they have so much fun digesting this complicated information, go down and enjoy some jazz it's in the Langford Chiropractic parking lot on Highland Parkway and Cleveland, and it's put on by Highland District Council, Highland Business Association, and I encourage everybody to go. It's part of the Twin Cities, or St. Paul Jazz Fest, which is going on. Just a little background. A few months ago, Governor Dayton, Mayor Coleman, Jonathan Sage-Martinson, and myself went out to Detroit to meet with the president of Ford Americas, Joe Heinrichs, Rob Corey, who will be speaking here today, as well as Donna Inch. And we had a very good meeting, very receptive meeting. The three things that we really focused on were clear, and Ford was very receptive to all of them. One, we wanted to make sure that the site got cleaned up, the environmental site got cleaned up at Ford. Two, we wanted to start getting economic development started at the site. And three, we discussed what Ford's legacy could be at the site and in the city of St. Paul. All those things, we had a very fruitful conversation. We were really grateful that the governor would take an entire day to go out, and it shows the importance of the site, and we know how important the site is, not only to the community, but also it's important because there's such a great opportunity. And I think Ford realizes that this site is on the banks of the Mississippi River, equidistance from the two downtowns, 5 minutes from the airport, in one of the premier neighborhoods of St. Paul. So we all know this is a great site, and we're very grateful for Ford continuing to listen and continue to work so that we can make this site, position this site to be ready for the vision that the community has for it. So this is the next big step in this. I know Merritt will lay out some of the timeline, and like all the timelines that we've had, certain things have to happen for the timeline to happen, so I don't think anything's exactly date certain, as we've learned before, but we want to do this site right, and we continue to be grateful for Ford and their thoroughness in the cleanup. So without further ado, thank you all for coming out. Merritt Clapp-Smith, who everybody here should know from Planning and Economic Development. Thank you.
Thank you all for coming out on this beautiful summer night. This is the site we're talking about. This picture taken just a couple of days ago by Mike Hogan, who you will meet later during this presentation. So a lot's happened at this site since it's closed, and a lot will continue to happen. For the agenda tonight, we're going to hear from a number of different people. The next after me will be hearing about the environmental status and cleanup, and that will be presented by Amy Hadieris from the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency. We will then hear about the remediation activities and future site use from Mike Hogan from Ford Motor Company and Rob Corey from Ford Land. We will then move, and I'll just update you on some of the steps the city is taking to support redevelopment. So I am Merritt Clapsmith, a principal city planner that's been working on this project for a number of years. And then we will try to wrap up right at about 6:30. So there are a lot of people here, and we're trying to anticipate all the questions that people might have. If there's anything you're wondering about or thinking following the presentations, the meeting will adjourn, and then feel free to look up some of the people you've heard from tonight. They'll be around the room so that you can speak with them directly and share your comments or questions. So without further ado, welcome Amy Hadieris.
Hey, well, thank you, Merritt. It's good to be here tonight. The Ford meetings always have a great turnout, and that's so good to see. It's not the case at a lot of the community meetings I go to. I know that the city has had a number of community meetings over the past few years to talk about different topics, but this is the first meeting to happen since the environmental investigation has largely been wrapped up. So it's a great time to share that information with you. Let's see. So just by way of brief introduction, I'm a hydrogeologist, and I work with we call the Brownfields program at the Pollution Control Agency. And the role of the Brownfields program is to work with outside parties to clean up contaminated sites so that they can be redeveloped and safe for that new redevelopment plan. So to that effect, what we do is we review and approve the proposed scope of work. So we look at, what kind of investigation are they planning to do. We offer comments and finally review and approve that. We review the investigation results, and if in so doing we see some gaps in the information, we request that additional work be conducted in kind of a phased approach to collect that additional information. Once the investigation is done, we review the cleanup plan, and then once the cleanup plan is done, we review the final documentation to make sure that the cleanup happened according to plan and achieved the cleanup goals. The environmental investigation at Ford has been going on for a number of years in kind of spurts. It started off back in 2007, 2008, but those first 4 years, the plant was still open, and so access to a lot of the site was limited because of the large percentage of the site that was covered by buildings and all the utilities which were still alive and active at that time. So the first 4 years, it was kind of a piecemeal investigation. And then, starting in 2012, the site, for a couple of years, was just really the main focus of demolition activities. Some of you may know that before a building can be demolished, all the hazardous building materials need to be removed from it, the asbestos and the lead-based paint and all that. And I believe that took almost a year, to clean out the buildings so that they could be demolished. Then, of course, taking down the buildings took about another year. And during those 2 years, it really wasn't possible to do much in the way of environmental investigation. There was too much going on there. So there was kind of a little bit of a hiatus there. In 2014, we find that the structures are now gone, the above-grade structures, the slabs still remained in place. And so this is a time when the environmental investigation really hit full stride. In the environmental world, we really like full-time environmental oversight when slabs are being pulled up, when utilities are being removed, when pits are being excavated, because having that initial view right when the slab comes up and we can see the soil for the first time in these specific areas of concern, that's really valuable information. And so Ford did have full-time environmental oversight when all those slabs were being removed and all those subgrade features were coming up. And so that provided a lot of really great information. Once the slabs were gone, the site was finally pretty open and accessible. And so at that point then, the next way we gather environmental investigation is by drilling, and so then Ford was able to finish off the drilling investigation. So that's what's been going on. Much of the information that we've gathered, has really been the last few years since the slabs were removed. Just to step back, this is a aerial photo from 2007. You folks have probably seen this before, but by way of background, you can see that the buildings encompass quite a large area of the site. The main assembly building on the left, attached to a big warehouse at the south end, and then the paint building. So most of those early years, the investigation was focused on kind of the open areas, the parking lots and whatnot. Fast forward a few years, and this map shows all the soil borings that have been advanced across the site. So there's a lot of holes in the ground were poked. These soil borings are superimposed on top of that 2007 aerial photo. When the borings were drilled, those buildings were gone. But the take-home point from this slide is that in combination of the environmental oversight when the structures were being removed and all the information from these drilling investigations, boy, there's a lot of information on the environmental conditions of this site. We've got a lot of data by which to get a really good understanding of the soil and the groundwater contamination that exists. And so what did we find? Well, this map shows the areas of soil contamination that have been identified. And colors are a little bit hard to see, but through that environmental oversight that I mentioned when the slabs were coming up, Ford identified about 60 or so really kind of discrete areas of soil contamination at the site. And those are largely represented by those green splotches on the map. And it kind of represents different types of contaminants, but they kind of have one thing in common, and that is they're fairly small areas, and a lot of them are pretty low impact. So in my mind, I refer to the green areas as the no big deal areas. They're very easily dealt with. And as a matter of fact, we already have a cleanup plan in place for those green areas, and Ford has, for the last several months, has already been excavating a lot of those areas. So that cleanup is already started. Yeah, I apologize. Oh, that helps. Thank you. The green areas are pretty small, so you might not be able to see it. I don't have a pointer, but they're kind of spread out over the light gray area, just and not continuous. They represent an area where maybe there was a pit that was dug out, or a utility, or a tank, or something like that. So since the site,
You can just mention we'll post this online tomorrow. So
okay.
people can look close up.
Merritt is saying that this presentation will be posted online tomorrow, so then you'll be able to zoom in and see that information better. So a lot of small green areas that are no big deal. About 5 areas, in my mind I think 5 areas of the site where soil contamination is more significant. And those are represented by the yellow and the dark gray shading. The 2 yellow spots in the south part of the site, that's where soil is impacted by what we call hydrocarbon solvents. It's a solvent that's used in the painting operation, and that's a location where there were some former tanks that held that chemical, and also the south end of the building, there must have been some leakage or something. So that's what those 2 yellow areas are, and kind of represent that same kind of contamination of the hydrocarbon solvents. The top of the slide is the north parking lot, that kind of larger blocky gray area, and that represents a fairly large area of petroleum contaminated soil. There were some utility lines, some pipelines running through there that leaked, so that's kind of a large area of petroleum contamination. The central kind of thin gray area that's coming down the middle of the site, that's got can't really be tied to one particular source. That was kind of the heart of the site. There was a lot of stuff going on in that area. So it's kind of a lot of contamination that's intermingled from different sources. But there we see some heavy metal impacts, we see some petroleum impacts, and just kind of stuff all mixed up together. And then the 5th area is the dark gray area at the south end of the site. And that pertains to a historical fill area or disposal area that was operated from the really early days of the plant. I'd say the late 20s to maybe the mid 40s or so. And that kind of dates back, as many of you know, to a time when there weren't any environmental regulations on what to do with your waste. So that's an area where back in the day, wastes were disposed of directly on the ground, maybe burned, buried. And so that represents an area where, again, there's that hydrocarbon solvent contamination and also some heavy metals, such as specifically lead is probably the main one. There's also been a really comprehensive groundwater investigation at the site. I know you, given the scale of the picture and the tidiness of the wells, you probably can't see it, but if you check it out online, you might be able to see it. But there's about 34 wells or so that have been drilled on the site. And if you think of the ground beneath your feet, it's kind of like a layer cake. You know, the top layer is the soil. Some of the wells are very shallow and were installed kind of in the soil layer where groundwater was encountered. Other wells are a little bit deeper, and they're in, like, below the soil, there's bedrock. And so some of the wells are drilled in the first bedrock layer, and then the deepest of the wells are installed in a very deep bedrock layer. So by doing this, we can evaluate not only the groundwater contamination across the site, but in different layers of the site to kind of get a more 3D picture of what's going on. I don't have all the groundwater data yet. Ford is almost done preparing that final groundwater report, so there'll be some more information coming in very soon. But based on all the data that I have seen thus far, there's the shallow groundwater is contaminated in certain areas where there maybe was a tank that was excavated or some significant soil contamination, but that's kind of spotty. And the best way to deal with that is just to remove the contaminated soil that's causing the problem. So that's kind of the cleanup plan for that. The groundwater in the bedrock aquifers it's not too bad, really. I mean, it's really not a site where there's a whole lot of groundwater contamination based on the information that we have at this time. There's some stuff there, but not at levels that are of great concern. So, yep, we still got a couple of other reports coming in, but things are looking pretty good, and it's certainly a site that can be, cleaned up and put to whatever use the community and the city wants to see happen. So. Oh, pardon me?
Yeah. Advance it one.
Okay, I just remembered that you wanted me to comment on Area C as well, so sorry about that. Some of you may be familiar with another disposal site that Ford used back in the early days. The meeting today is really about the redevelopment parcel, but there's another part across Mississippi River Boulevard. You can see that parking lot that's kind of close to the river. That's a historical dump that Ford used kind of 1940s probably to the mid-1960s, and there's a whole separate environmental investigation that's ongoing at that site. It's not part of the redevelopment action, so it's kind of separate but parallel tracks. We don't have there's been a lot of work done out there, but we don't have the final report yet from Ford. They're still kind of pulling things together for us. So we do anticipate having another meeting specifically on that area in the future. Just wanted to give you an update on that. Okay. Yep, and then the City of St. Paul does have all of our environmental documents on their website. And so you can look at all the reports, and there's quite a lot there. Also, I think they post our approval letters and our comment letters as well, so it's a good way to kind of keep tab on things. Okay, well, thank you.
Go ahead, Rob.
Yep. So hi, I'm Rob Corey. I'm the Director of Global Real Estate Services for Ford Motor Company. And Mike?
I'm Mike Hogan. I'm the site manager here on the ground at St. Paul, attending to the day-to-day activities.
So the first information that we wanted to give you was kind of what's going on at the site these days and how are we handling things such that it's not impacting the community in a negative way, and that's what Mike's going to talk about.
We do take great pride in that, and I hope it shows for our neighbors. I mean, we want to get this work done as quietly and as efficiently as we can without impacting the community around us, and it's a challenge. We had 2 million square feet of factory to take down, and we got that done. We pulled the slabs up. Every now and then we'll have some trucks taking materials out of there. As we do this week, we're disposing of some of the impacted soil from the site. And you might notice that it's not constant, but every now and then to accomplish this task we'll have to be, landfilling soil to get the remediation done. So that's what's going on presently. If you peek through the fence, and I know some of you do every now and then, you'll see excavators out on site pulling the soil out of those impacted areas that Amy mentioned, the green areas for now, and then we'll get into the yellows and the grays at future dates. But we're We identified the impacted areas, and we're addressing that in a very methodical way. And as Amy said, we're in lockstep with the MPCA every step of the way. We have, constant oversight from environmental experts on the site with us, along with the construction guys. So that's the day-to-day. We remove soil, we delineate the extents of the impacts, we dispose of soil that needs to be disposed of, and we backfill with clean fill. If you look in there at one of our pride points on the site, again, if you peek in, you see a big, it looks like the Himalaya mountains of gray material. That's crushed concrete that used to be the slabs and the foundations of the factory. And there's 300 million pounds of that might have gone to landfill had we not been able to come up with a great agreement with the MPCA to reuse that clean fill that goes back into the ground on site. And it just, you can't imagine the number of trucks it saved over the road and into our landfills. So those are some of the successes we've had, we hope to have going forward. So let's see, I believe that is what's going on. And Rob is I appreciate him coming here from Dearborn, our Director of Real Estate. He's going to take you through the vision for the end game, if you will, once we're done and when we hand it over to the city and the new developer where we're headed.
All right, thanks, Mike. So Amy did a great job talking about the process from an environmental perspective that we've gone through. Ford has worked and will continue to work very closely with the MPCA to make sure that this remediation is done in accordance with all the rules and laws that we should follow. And I don't know how you made that so simple when you went through that. That was really good. It's a complicated topic, and you did a very good job. I am not an environmental expert. I am the real estate guy for Ford. So my focus is going to be on, what's going to be allowed on the site after we're done with this cleanup. We are going through the cleanup. Ford has made the decision that Ford will do the cleanup. So we are, and when I say that, the site was going to always be cleaned up, but the question was, well, do you sell it to somebody and let that person clean it up, or does Ford want to do the cleanup? The decision's been made that Ford wants to do the cleanup. So we're going to be on the site for the next few years, cleaning up and getting it done, and we'll all know that it's been done properly. So we're comfortable with that approach. But it is a process, and it does take a while. So the majority of the cleanup that we're doing, again, I'm not the environmental guy. We're doing everything the way we should do it with the MPCA, but there's a fair amount of digging and hauling. So you're just taking the contaminated soils and removing them from the site, taking them to the proper landfill and disposing of them properly. So that's a big part of the remediation. By the time we're done, we expect, based on what we know today, that the majority of the site will be available for the types of things that the city's been talking about for a number of years, which is mainly that mixed-use development where you have some retail, you have some office, you have some residential, maybe you've got multifamily with retail on the first floor. A majority of the site will be available for that use. We've always looked at the land along Ford Parkway as being great commercial property. There's a lot of commercial retail stuff right there. So some of that property will be focused more on commercial, the remainder of the site being available for mixed use and residential. The other question that we get asked often is, when is the site going to go to market, and what are you doing about finding a developer? So when Ford made the decision that we would do the remediation, that did delay us going out to market to sell the property. So ideally in the real estate world, what I would like to do is time the finishing of the sale process with the finishing of the remediation. So, it's probably going to take a buyer 12 months worth of due diligence to evaluate the site and complete a sale. So when we look at the environmental timeline, and right now Ford has told me to say, probably sometime in 2019 that we would be done. Obviously when Chris Tolbert and others came to Ford, we made the commitment to get it done as quickly as we could, but get it done right. And this stuff it does take time. So given that, we're on a path towards sometime in 2019, then maybe at the beginning of 18, middle of 2017, we would start going to market. What I've told the city folks is happy to have one-off discussions with interested parties that are interested in this site and looking at doing development. Every time I come to town, I have a couple meetings with developers that might be interested in the site, just to let them know where we're at in the process and keep them interested in this site. I mean, it's a great site. It's not hard to keep them interested, but I want to be fair and let them know kind of where we're at in our process and what we think the timing would look like. This just has some of the steps that we'll go through. Ideally, when we choose a master developer, we're looking for somebody that has the ability to develop a site that's this large and this prominent. So they have to be a very well-capitalized, very good developer. They have to understand that, you know, this isn't necessarily a site where you're going to, you know, put a movie theater and big box retail. It's more than that, and they have to be willing to work in trying to meet some of the city's goals as it relates to the mixed-use development and residential and that kind of stuff. So we're on board with that. We think that maximizes the value of the site. You know, it's a Ford Motor Company asset, so we owe it to our shareholders to maximize the value of the site, and what the city wants to do will lead to good value for the site. So we think it's a win-win. You know, we feel like we've been aligned with the MPCA, we've been aligned with the city, and look forward to getting through the environmental process and move it forward with a developer.
Thank you, Mike and Rob. Kind of want to give everybody about 10, 20 seconds to absorb all that information that you've kind of been waiting years to hear. And we're excited that we're having this meeting and at a point where we're really moving forward and getting some definition about what the opportunities are at this site. So a big thanks to Ford for coming here today to share that. So I'm just going to update you on a couple of the steps that the city is doing to help advance the site to redevelopment. And we are keeping our steps and the timing of those steps coordinated with the activities that we know Ford is doing, so that we are moving the site as quickly as possible together to redevelopment. So the big thing we're working on this year, and that you'll hear more about this fall, is putting together a zoning and public realm plan for the site. And what that is, it will be legal zoning for the site that talks about future uses, layout, and the form of development. So it will identify what mix of land uses are allowed at the site, and maybe if there are parts of the site that should be more one type of land use or another. Talk about height and scale of buildings. The public realm part of it will include location of streets, trails, and parks. So the property that will officially become city and public spaces. There will be some building design work, stormwater management, where is the stormwater infrastructure going to be, and more. So that's a lot of work to put that together, but we're very excited about the work that's going on and to be able to bring that forward this fall. And a lot of what we are doing when we're putting that together is based on the community meetings we had over the past year and a half and the early planning work and all of the input we've gotten. So we're hoping that when we come forward this fall and put out these concepts, that you will recognize a lot of the things that the community's been saying they're interested in those concepts. So this site is absolutely an opportunity site for sustainability. When you have a site of this size that's starting from scratch with infrastructure and development, you can do things differently, and you can do them at a much different scale. So you're putting in infrastructure systems site-wide as opposed to sort of infilling a single lot in an already developed city. So you get some economies of scale in doing the infrastructure. It's more cost-effective, and you can do it in a way that's better for the environment. So the types of systems we have those opportunities for are energy, and we've been doing energy study for a while. We've just done another update of that, and we'll have information about that this fall. The stormwater management, those of you that came to some of our meetings will remember we're talking about the concept of treating stormwater in a central spine that becomes an amenity on the site, as you see in that upper image. We can address water delivery, use, and reuse. we can look at creating intentional networks for walking and biking across the site so that they're well connected through the site and to the adjacent community and places that people want to go to and come from. Connecting just the spaces and places across the site for people, and trying to create sort of overarching design themes so that the site, when it's developed, kind of holds together visually and aesthetically. So innovation is financially feasible, these types of systems, if you plan for them from the start and figure out the smart way to do them. So the city has been identifying for all of these major systems financial strategies, doing feasibility work and analyzing costs so that we have that information ready to help the master developer pick up these ideas and move forward successfully. Future employment at the site. As of this evening and tomorrow, we are officially releasing the finalized job strategy report. We've talked about this a little bit before. We had a work group with partners from DEED and Greater MSP and the Chamber of Commerce, Highland Business Association, Port Authority, and other organizations, and we talked about what jobs are appropriate for the site. Given its context in a neighborhood, you can't have a lot of trucking uses. So the recommended target industries are health and medical, research and development, sort of small custom manufacturing that's not heavily trucking based, institutional or education, and then office, retail, and services. There might be other opportunities to bring jobs to the site that come up, but we think these are ones that should be specifically targeted because as this site develops, it's really quick and easy for the retail and the residential to roll in. It can take a little bit more work to attract the interest of employers, get them looking at this site relative to other ones around the region. So we will be working actively with partners to begin to talk about this site with those prospective industries, work with them, talk to site selection people so that we're really making sure that employment can be a piece of this site because it's important for neighborhoods and it's important for the city to have a strong employment base. Future traffic. No, everybody loves traffic. So we have a trip modeling study going on right now. We've had this going on for a number of months. Our consultants from Nelson Nygaard and SRF have been looking at existing traffic situations in the area. They have been building models that look not only at anticipated vehicle trips, but also what's the opportunities for transit use, walking, biking. How can the design of the site be changed to better support people not always using their cars, but taking some of those alternative modes if they're in the area going shopping or dropping kids at school or other activities. So they've run a preliminary model of kind of a concept for what the site might have on it, given the existing network around the site and some ways to connect streets and movement through the site. And the good news is that that preliminary analysis is looking quite positive. The consultants feel that it is going to be possible to manage traffic within the existing transportation system of the area. And so we are going to have them do finer tuned modeling, and they're going to look at directions those trips are going, come up with estimates so that when we come back with the final information in the fall, they'll have some pretty concrete numbers, you know, what's heading over the bridge to the west, how will Montreal be impacted, does anything need to happen at an intersection to make things work in the future. So that will be coming in the fall, but the good news is that it's looking pretty good. So our future meetings, I've said fall, that's what we're aiming for. So we would come forward with draft zoning and public realm plan, and as part of that, we would talk about how the traffic fits into that, how the stormwater fits in, site-wide energy, and that information will share the mix and scale of uses that we imagine happening at the site. So at that point, we would have public meetings again so that we could get answer questions, get people's input, reactions. We will take that information, refine the draft zoning and public realm plan, and then once we've gone through that, we would formally bring it forward to the Planning Commission and the City Council for consideration. So that is it for the evening and our plans, and I think we've raced through this. So there'll be plenty of time after this for you to go move around the room, ask questions from people you've heard from tonight, share your comments with us, and stay connected, sign up to get information, and thank you so much.